The uprising began sometime around 1 in the morning on October 11, 1972, in cellblock 1 of the DC jail. An inmate faked a seizure. When 2 guards came to investigate, his cellmate produced a .38 caliber pistol and took them hostage. The inmates freed others throughout the cell block, taking 7 more guards as hostages in the process. At 4:30 a.m., D.C. Department of Corrections Director Kenneth Hardy and Washington Post reporter William Claiborne entered the cell block to negotiate. "We want you to understand one thing very clearly," one man told them. "This is not a riot, it's a revolution. They want it to be released. Immediately." Said another, "We're treated like animals, and we want out. This is a death play or a freedom play." This was the situation when New York Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm arrived at the inmates' request at 10:30 that morning. Fresh off of a trailblazing and ultimately unsuccessful bid for the Democratic nomination for president, she joined D.C. officials like Delegate Walter Fauntroy and future Mayor Marion, who were already attempting negotiations at the jail. But Chisholm brought experience, having helped resolve a standoff at a Queens prison in 1970, as well as empathy for all involved. "I do not condone the things they have done," she said. "All I am saying is that they are human beings." Conditions at the D.C. jail had long been nearing the breaking point. Just 10 months earlier, the ACLU had released a damning report calling the 100-year-old facility a filthy example of man's inhumanity to man. The jail was incredibly overcrowded, housing more than 1,300 mostly black prisoners in a building built for 550. Many had not been convicted and were stuck there because they could not afford to pay bail. Roaches and pests were commonplace. Medical care was offered only sporadically, and prisoners complained of regular beatings from guards for which they had no real recourse. Outside the jail, a crowd was forming. Families of guards held hostage, families of those incarcerated, and a growing presence of heavily armed police. Inside, tensions were rising. An inmate put Hardy in front of a window and held a knife to his head. The corrections director pleaded with officials not to send riot police to quell the uprising, saying, "I don't want any bloodshed." He had reason to worry. Barely a year earlier, the Attica prison uprising in New York ended in a massacre when the governor ordered state police and prison officials to resolve it by force. Authorities fired nearly 2,000 bullets at the prison yard, killing 29 inmates as well as 9 hostages. Speaking through a megaphone, Chisholm pleaded with them for dialogue. "Please God, let this be no Attica," she exclaimed. Gradually, the prisoners warmed to her. One of their primary concerns was the plight of the children held in the jail. As a consequence of the D.C. Crime Bill of 1970, juveniles as young as 16 were incarcerated alongside grown men. You take a 16-year-old kid and stick him in there with someone who's been in Leavenworth or Atlanta for 30 or 40 years, and it ruins the kid, one inmate later testified. Hearing about them moved her to tears. Soon after, a group of 17 boys caught up in the standoff were released into the prison yard. After several more hours of tense negotiations, there was a breakthrough. The prisoners wanted to tell a judge what was happening in the D.C. jail. At 6:30 p.m., 6 prisoners, along with Kenneth Hardy and Walter Fauntroy, left the jail and headed for the district court, where Judge William J. Bryan held an emergency hearing. One by one, the inmates went before the judge, complained about slow judicial proceedings, and lambasted conditions at the jail. "I feel like I'm being treated like an animal and I don't belong there," said Robert Jones. "They don't think we are people, like we lost all our sense of being a human being," said Alvin McCoy. "We want these little kids out of there," said William Brown. In response, Judge Bryan ordered the separation of juveniles from the adults at the D.C. jail, regular inspections, and ordered lawyers for all of the inmates who wanted them. But on their individual cases, he said, there was little he could do. Back at the jail, inmates were read a note by Hardy promising no reprisals of any kind or court action against any inmate. And shortly after midnight on October 12th, nearly 24 hours after it began, the standoff ended. Chisholm was praised for diffusing a potentially deadly situation. "Mrs. Chisholm had the key, wits, power, and brains to cool the inmates," said the father of Kenneth Hardy. "She is responsible for the release of my son." But despite Hardy's note, 14 men involved in the uprising were charged and several convicted. Prosecutors alleged it was nothing more than an escape attempt gone wrong. Hardy disagreed. "I could empathize with the inmates," he said. "I've been trying to get rid of that monolithic Bastille, that dirty jail, for 6 years." D.C. finally constructed a new jail in 1976, and years later, the old one was demolished. But as one hostage negotiator reflected, the new jail cleaned up a mess and replaced it with an institution that had many of the same problems. For more D.C. history, visit weta.org/boundarystones.